Hello, my name is Tara All, and you can find me at taraall.com, TARAAAL.com. And this is the next video in my series that I've just begun on We Are the Planets. And this particular session is You Are Mercury. For those of you who aren't familiar with me or kind of my inspiration around this series and this work, a number of years ago, I began struggling a little bit with practicing and using astrology in a way that is more experiential, in ways that didn't trap me too much in my head. And I have a South Node in Gemini, and it is, of course, ruled by Mercury, and that Mercury is conjunct Venus, conjunct Saturn, and square Pluto. So it's an understatement to say that in this lifetime, I've been going through mental transformation or revision, whatever word you like to use, but that part of myself is really up for being reinvented and letting go of a lot of pieces of the past. So it's an old pattern for me to believe that if I have the information, if I know the answer or think I know the answer, that suddenly I've figured out the problem. And for me, that doesn't replace experience and doesn't replace this idea that, well, not even an idea, it doesn't replace really having been able to live that part of myself in moment to moment real time. So I don't have perfect words for all of this, but two things happened early on in my study of astrology. One is that my teacher, Laura Nalbandian, mentioned that if you really want to know the planets, you have to spend time. You have to spend time and really have open up a meditation with them. Let them speak to you personally. And it's not to negate what other people have studied and taught in mythology. All that is part of it, learning, but letting the flavor, letting the energy come through you is a big part of the process. And it's interesting, it's taken me, I did that some, but it's taken me a lot of years to get to a place of really understanding how important that is for me. So for me, this idea of we are the planets and you are the planets is that experience. And the way I have been fleshing it out in life came a number of years ago from Gainsburg, another one of my wonderful teachers, who suggested the technique planets on the first. In planets on the first, you choose a planet that you want to experience life through. So the function of that planet, technically, you move that planet to the ascendant, and I have other Zoom videos on this, so you can find me on EA Zoom on Planets on the First if you're interested, or on my website as well, or you can just reach out. But I've come to find that the technique is fun, but you don't even need the technique. Really, it's more about a living meditation. So let's just say that you've been feeling a lack of energy, or you've been feeling kind of unable to stand up for yourself and go after what you want. Maybe it's hard for you to take your turn. You feel like you're getting kind of pushed around in life, and you just sort of let things happen to you. If you want to assert yourself more as an individual and really step up for going after what you want in a very powerful way, choosing Mars first is a great example of a way that you can every day and every moment consciously choose that Mars part of yourself to show up first. It's like a filter, or a lens that you see life through. And to me, and to many of us, the planets, especially the personal planets, are all different aspects or represent different aspects of our psyche. And so they're all in there. It's just that we tend to be more comfortable working through one filter than the other. It's all just energy. But if Saturn has been more comfortable to me for a long time, and I shift into Mars mode, I'm going to have a really different experience of myself and of life. So this is what I've been doing for the past number of years. And I spent a little more than a year doing Venus first. That was my first planet. and then I did Mercury first, then I did Mars first, and currently I'm getting towards the end of a year where I've chosen to do Moon and Saturn at the same time. So I just share this to give you some context for this series of We Are the Planets is really goes along with that, so that when you're wanting to work with these things more personally, experientially, I'm hoping that that these videos will help you tune in to the energy, maybe in a different way. Even just spark up, your imagination or ways of looking at it or being with it, and it's certainly helping me. So, anyhow, this is You Are Mercury. And I want to start, it's interesting, I just spent some time in India, and it was my first time in India, and it was an amazing experience. And while I was in India, I was reading Krishnamurti's book, Freedom from the Known. And it's interesting, one of the things that I've been going through lately is really recognizing and observing how much I am stuck in my head, how much I am ruled by my thoughts, and this is not special to me. This is a very human thing, but some of us tend to lean in that direction more than others. So if you're like me, or know people like me, or have clients like me that are or similar to me, that kind of are a bit of a head case, it can be really useful to start looking at that in a different way. And of course, Mercury is where we traditionally start, because Mercury, at least in part of his rulership, is the left brain, logic, reasoning, how we make sense of things. But this idea of Mercury, it rules Gemini and Virgo. But from the Gemini standpoint, we think about Mercury being a ruling duality. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, because my perspective on this is shifting a bit. But I want to read a quote from Krishnamurti from the book Freedom from the Known. When you do not compare at all, when there is no ideal, no opposite, no factor of duality, when you no longer struggle to be different from what you are, what has happened to your mind? Your mind has ceased to create the opposite and has become highly intelligent, highly sensitive, capable of immense passion, because effort is a dissipation of passion. Passion, which is vital energy, and you cannot do anything without passion. So here's this idea. If what we call the Mercury mind in astrology has been categorizing, labeling, defining, naming, right? Do so much of the Mercury function is, this idea of learning, giving words, giving ultimately, meaning to things, not in a Sagittarius way of meaning, but in, this is a flower. Here's what I know about flowers, so this must be this way. When we do this, then we begin comparing things, right? I'm a boy, you're a girl, or vice versa in the case that I am a girl. But regardless, we then start to give goods and bads, rights and wrongs, betters and worse, all these pieces in here. So the mind is really busy with that most of the time. It really is. This idea of, most of us, comparison is what we do a lot of the time. Check this out for yourself during the day, or pay attention to the people around you and see how many times you hear people say things like, it's better, it's worse, it's not as bad as that, or even it's like this, it's not like this, or it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. Just observe how that's happening. And then think about how much energy really goes into that process. And when you sit with that, think about what does that actually serve? And we know that it's an important part of the learning process. So I am not diminishing the idea of language and words and definitions, right? I use it all the time. I use it all the time in my full-time job, at Sage Goddess, where I'm a resident astrologer and lead writer, and a big part of what I'm doing is copywriting all day long. Social copy, email, blogs, right? I am putting things into words. But at the same time, I'm starting to realize that those words do not really hit the true meaning of what something is. And so when we are working with Mercury and thinking about the you are Mercury part, I was thinking about this. I was thinking, you know, what if it's not actually the duality? What if the Mercury function in each of us, part of the purpose is just to bring to our attention the mind's tendency, or I don't know, commitment to breaking things into duality? What if it's not the duality, but just the showing us that part so that we can be aware of it? Do you know, Mercury in mythology is the trickster, so we always see him doing interesting things that way. He's also the messenger, and Mercury is specifically linked up with liminal space, the space of transition, which is interesting because, you know, in the periodic table, or you know, when it comes down to the elements, Mercury is also a transitional metal. So this idea of transition, being a transition metal, being a planet that rules the place of transition, the betwixt, the between. We can look at this in some ways as the space between what was and what will happen next. So what happens between what was and what will happen next? It's actually now, which is a really different appreciation of Mercury, because we tend to think of Mercury keeping us out of the now because we're stuck in our head, right? And when we're stuck in our head, generally we're dependent on focusing on something in the past, right? Memories, going back and looking at that. And then we are creating a still unknown future, which is not a real thing, from what we're pulling from the past. And then we're not in the present moment, right? But if Mercury is all about this place of transition, it's all of it, which includes the middle space, which includes the I don't know. And when we think about liminal space, many people believe that in that place of I don't know, where the past falls away and the future doesn't exist yet, that is where transformation happens, which would make sense with the nature of Mercury. So one of the things that I've been doing is I'm not trying to do something about these things. You know, I mean, it's more of a seeing how my mind works, seeing what it's doing, but not being so attached to it. To know all these teachings of being present or in the now, you know, from many, including Eckhart Tolle and a whole bunch of different people who talk about awareness. You know, it's about not identifying with the mind. It's not about trying to get rid of it or move past it, because once you are observing and seeing what it's doing, you are already proving that it's not you, because the you that's observing, capital Y, you, is something separate from that, or something more than that. And that can be a really happy place when you really experience that you're not your thoughts. So another thing that I have been kicking around, and this is another Krishnamurti quote, and he talks about time. And he says, "Do you know what time is? Not by the watch, not chronological time." Because that would really be Saturn, right? Although I leave room for there to be lots of different associations, even beyond the traditional, although I am also a big user of the traditional correspondences. So he says, do you know what time it is? Not by the watch, not chronological time, but psychological time. It is the interval between idea and action. An idea is for self-protection, obviously. It is the idea of being secure. Action is always immediate. It is not of the past or of the future. To act must always be in the present. But action is so dangerous, so uncertain, that we conform to an idea which we hope will give us a certain safety. And something about this clicked for me. Psychological time is the interval between idea and action. It's the space between. It's a liminal space. Like Mercury is a liminal space. So if Mercury is the space between, and we know Mercury is he can go between the upper lower worlds, he takes souls into the underworld, and he's able to go back out. He's the only God who's able to do that. So to relegate Mercury just to the logical mind is too small. It's not all of Mercury. It's part of Mercury. And it's a part that most of us have to confront first to get into the rest of it, right? So here's another example of this energy. In the Kabbalion, the Hermetic principles, the universe is mental. Everything's created by the mind. But that's not a problem. Once you understand that and work with it, and I don't remember the exact words in the Kabbalion, but basically it is, those who learn those secrets unlock the door to the kingdom, right? So it's a huge piece of what we have to work with on this planet in the way we've incarnated, which I think is pretty exciting. So the space between, how do you navigate it, right? And I think about with Mercury ruling Gemini and the twins, with Castor and Pollux, that story in part is a reconciliation between, eventually it's about recognizing that there is the mortal and the immortal part of ourselves, or if you like the words light and dark or day and night side of ourselves. But with Gemini, there always is this odd reconciliation with, here's this part trying to logically figure everything out, right? Then there's this irrational, emotional part of myself that is never going to be figured out that way, right? The ultimate duality that exists within us. So how do you come to the place where there's, room for both? And all of these things speak to space between, and so to me, it starts with duality, but then, starts to bend, when you start to really recognize how we live in a dual universe, that whole idea of duality takes on a different context. It's like when you know that it's not everything, right? So Neptune would be the everything. Right? Everything is one. There is no separate thing. From the soul's perspective, there's not a division. And even when we think about the lower and the higher mind, which again, there's different ways of looking at this, but if we think about the Mercury mind, originally programmed to look at things with either or, right or wrong, good or bad, this or that, whatever words you like, it would be the Iranian mind, the higher mind, sees things always as both. There's not a separation, there's an inclusiveness. Everything holds everything. And even this is true with polarity, right? We always know something always includes this polarity point. It is all whole unto itself. We learn and experience through separation. That is our way of seeing things. It's just one way of seeing things. And so Mercury is the part of us that is learning to see things, or that is seeing things. So Mercury shows us how we naturally think and the ideas and thoughts that frame everything in our lives. You know, it's like if you have this movie projector running, and the way that you project the image out, the way you interpret the image, the way that you communicate the image, the way you make sense of everything happening around you, this is so much the Mercury function. And this is so extremely important, right? Because what you think is your reality. You are creating your reality from your thoughts every second of every day. If you want to really make a shift in your life into a different way of living, into a different way of being, if you even want to just open a window into a new way of seeing things, starting with how you think and where your thoughts are focused is a great place to start. On my trip to India, and this is not news to me, it's just that as I, evolve, I do less trying to, I guess, make things happen, and I'm hanging out more to sort of see what I'm already doing, because I find that, like, for myself, adding a bunch of new things up, I'm going to do this, and now I'm going to do this differently, and I'm going to add this to my list, and I'm going to achieve this thing, or whatever it is. It's not particularly successful if I'm layering that on top of old patterns. Like, it's a saying that we all know, if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got, right? So for me, I'm very aware that it is my thinking, it's not the only thing that is in this zone for me. I've got a lot of emotional pieces too, but my thinking is something that I've used, I believe, for lifetimes to keep me really busy and to distract me away from other things that could be more meaningful and purposeful action in my life. I will use a personal example because I myself is the best example I have. I hang out with me the most. and I'm in this skin. So for me, I have a lot of body, like, I think about my body a lot, and specific, like, how it's working. Is it working okay? So digestion, I have Pluto in the 6th house, classic case of, obsessing over things in general, but like digestion is a big one for me. So I've come to recognize that my whole life I have focused so much of my power and concentration on what's happening in my guts. And what am I eating? What can I eat, or what should I eat? What will the outcome be? Will I have to run to the bathroom? Do I have a stomach ache? How am I going to manage it? Will there be a bathroom? So I was like little stuff, right? Because, like, I keep living my life. It's not like I, am like stuck at home unable to do things. But it's a huge impact, because there are many times where I tend to not want to choose to do something because I worry about what might happen based on what happened in the past, right? Perfect example of the Mercury mind. Something happened in the past, I still hold on to it, and then I project it into the future. None of that is real. The past is memories of my emotional experience of something. The future hasn't happened, and actually will never happen, because all there is now. And what I've recognized, how much I've been uncomfortable with now, and not just now, but with just how I am now. Like, here's another famous Mercury thing. If you catch yourself wanting to change your chemistry all the time, which most of us do, like, all right, right now it's Wednesday, 6:37 a.m. my time in Los Angeles. Like, I got up early to record this on a Wednesday because Wednesday is Mercury's day, and I felt like, yeah, that felt like a good flow, right? And I wanted to do it before I headed into the office because when I get home, I get tired, right? So it's early morning, I'm up doing my thing. Most people at this point are thinking about their morning cup of coffee, right? And then at some point, right, you've got to get some other energy to get yourself through the day. And then you might not like how you're feeling, right? So what are the quickest ways to change your body chemistry? And by the way, I think about this body chemistry going with Mercury a lot. You think about like Mercury in a thermometer, right, being affected by the environment. So is our Mercury self. I mean, the moon is part of this process as well. But right now I'm holding with the Mercury piece. So things are happening, my own insides are happening, and I'm starting to not feel very good in this moment. And I don't really like how that feels. So changing chemistry-wise, the easiest ways to do it are through food, substances, sex, and exercise. Welcome to humanity. We are forever trying to control our chemistry to bring it into the zones that we prefer or like by changing our body chemistry. Is what we love to do, you know? And that part of us, the Mercury part of us, is, you know, quick to respond to those things. Mercury is also linked with the nervous system, right? Most of us in this, especially in the United States of America, nervous system junkies. You know, we love it. We love living in our nervous system. And there's nothing wrong with being in your nervous system, but it does make it very difficult to find a peaceful place to just rest with how and who you are in the moment. And I'm coming to find that that's really where it's at. So after that little rant, back to my original beginning to share about India. So when I was in India, of all places to trigger digestion, right, I went to India. Spent part of my time in Delhi, which is known as, you know, Delhi belly for people's issues. And I just tuned in with myself. And I spent pretty much the majority of every day, from waking up to going to sleep, with some mental fixation on that part of myself. But it was the first time that I didn't make it so much of a problem. You know, sometimes we say to ourselves, we say, I'm not really living my life if I'll use myself in this particular case, like, I'm not really living my life if all I do is think about my digestion. That's not really living. But I think that statement is not true. The true statement around that is thinking about my digestion all day long is how I'm really living. That is my real life. And when we can really come to a place of, you know, accepting that, I think that's where the change can start to happen. And I don't think, by the way, that after lifetimes or a whole lifetime or years of a certain thought habit or a certain belief habit or fear, anxiety habits, that you suddenly just swoop in and say, whoop, I'm now observing my mind, so now I'm going to be free of, you know, that old pathology. I don't think it's that simple, but at the same time, I think it is. But we don't know. So, you know, when you choose to work with Mercury in a personal way, and if you choose to work with Mercury first, and if you are recognizing, you know, in your life at this point that you want to use your mind in new ways, and that you don't want your mind, you know, in the body-mind sense, you don't want your mind to rule you, then being in this space, this transition space between paying attention to what I'm thinking, but not necessarily acting on that thought, is rich. It's really rich. But it means there may be a period of doing a little less. So here's some other little things about Mercury, because I feel like I didn't give like a lot of juice, and I'll talk briefly about Mercury and the signs. But I hope that if you are on a process of, or in a process of actualizing astrology, similar in this way, that you will reach out and share. It's inspiring for me to hear about it, and I love hearing all of your ideas, so I would really welcome that. So here's another thing about Mercury. Mercury is the part of us that can move. In all this stuff I'm talking about, Mercury can move. We're not stuck, right? Mercury is super flexible. So even while the left brain is doing its thing, and we have our patterns of here's how I'm projecting life, and we have all these ideas about how things are, or who we are, how things work, how things won't work. Maybe you have, negative patterns that constantly say, I'll never have enough. And even on the flip side, you might change your, mantra or your affirmation every day to say, still focusing on enough. But the problem is, whatever we focus on, the enough in this example, still going to rise to the surface. So how do we get out of that space? How do we get out of the space of mentally fixating on things, which then ensures that they persist, right? It's like the saying that what we resist persists. It's true. And even if you sort of flip that coin to say, like, I'll use myself again, for example. Let's just say if I say, oh, I'm going to stop worrying so much about my digestion. That's still worrying about it. It's still the focal point, and most of us, most of you who are listening to this video, who are part of a EA Zoom group, or really part of this kind of soul-centered psychological astrology, you're into healing, and you're into like getting deep into things so that you can transform and be more conscious about your evolution, so you can work with that energy, so that you can let go of old patterns and move forward and heal for yourself and for generations forward and back. I was listening to Gary Caton 2 days ago, I think. He was talking about, it was a thing on Chiron, talking about Chiron for a second. He was talking about healing, and he said, he kind of hates the focus always on what we need to heal or the wound, because he said, at what point is there enough healing? At what point have you healed enough to now do what you need to do? And I think it's an important part to remember. It's not an aiming for perfection. That's just a false idea. So healing is super important. And with the mind, I think it's all about healing, actually with everything. I think it's about healing our relationship with things. So with this whole idea with Mercury here is I'm offering myself an opportunity to heal my relationship with my mind in ways that may allow me to use it in different ways, and in ways that may give me a spaciousness and a freedom from a more tight way of living. But it doesn't mean that all of a sudden all that stuff's going to go away. It's like with meditation, right? You don't try to stop the mental chatter. You just choose something different and deeper, and you let the chatter go on. But the chatter then doesn't become the thing you choose. So this idea that Mercury is the part that can move in all of this is super, super, super hopeful. More than hopeful, It's like you have the power to change your relationship with your thoughts, and even to directly work with your thoughts. Jason Hawley teaches a lot about Mercury, and the year actually that I was living Mercury first, he did an amazing workshop at Norwalk on Mercury, and he talks about in mythology that Mercury is the character that always keeps the story going, which I love. For some reason, I was like, oh my gosh, like I get it. Mercury, when we get it out of the definition of this part of just our head or our mind, when we just sort of let Mercury be Mercury without our ideas of what it means, and I mean even our astrology ideas of what it means. When he talks about Mercury keeping the story going in mythology, he says, Mercury shows up all the time when things are stuck. And Mercury isn't attached to a particular outcome. So there's an idea of Mercury being amoral, not having morals. There's not good or bad, which speaks to the swinging both ways nature of Mercury, which is awesome, right? Because there's like room to move wherever you want to move, but the story needs to keep going. So the Mercury in you helps you keep on transitioning from one thing to the other. If you've been feeling stuck, if you feel like your story's been stuck and it's just like re-looping on chapter 1 over and over again, Mercury is a great planet within and without and archetypally to work with to get the movement back. In fact, you learn with Mercury that even like moving the physical body stimulates, the creative mind, gets things unstuck. So, imagine your own little feet with wings, where can you go and how can you go? This idea of changing chemistry, fits into this as well. But change is here in this part of you. Doesn't mean it's not in other parts of you, but it's in this part of you. So Mercury also is, we've now learned how toxic Mercury is, right, as an element. One of the things that we have especially learned is in dental fillings, which most of us, well, I worked for a period of time in dentistry. So an amalgam filling, is a metal made up partially of mercury. And many of us have those metal fillings in our mouths from years back, but now we know that it's toxic, right? And so I was doing a little, look up on Mercury, the element, because it's definitely not an area of my expertise, but I was thinking, okay, if we're going to talk about Mercury in mythology as the Hermes figure, and we're going to talk about Mercury, how we interpret it in the chart, and we're going to talk about, Mercury as an element is only a natural part of that process. And ultimately, it's a neurotoxin, right? How interesting. And historically it was used as a poison. So, you can play with that yourself, but I start to think with myself of, so what maybe Mercury, in addition to all the classic things we already know that it represents, maybe it also gives us an idea in astrology, a little bit of a signature of, some of the poison we have going on in ourselves. And poison doesn't have to be a bad thing, A little bit of poison can be homeopathic medicine, but too much poison, of course, can be debilitating. But this idea of like how we look at Mercury, what Mercury is doing, how Mercury is doing what it's doing. So back to this idea of Mercury as an element. So Mercury could actually enter the body very easily. Its vapors can pass through the skin into the bloodstream. It also can be inhaled and swallowed. So they're finding that it gets in easily. How fitting is that with thoughts, right? Thoughts permeate everything. And when Mercury gets into the body, it interferes with essential chemical reactions. And when it does that, eventually it can cause sickness or death. So we've got all these different ways of looking at chemistry and changing chemistry and what changes chemistry. But what I'm saying is working with your Mercury can change your chemistry. Those ways I was talking about as far as, food, substances, sex, exercise, all the ones that we go to quickly when we just want to change how things feel in this body. Working with Mercury is another one. I do believe working with Mercury can literally change that chemistry. So for the last little bit of this talk, let's just get into Mercury in the signs, getting back to the idea of how we think. So I always think about Mercury, how we make sense of things. What kind of a thinker are you? How do you think? How is it that you sort of make sense of what's happening in life? How do you connect the dots of what's going on? And when you're aware of how this happens, you can then start to make some conscious decisions about, is that the way I like to do it? Is that the picture I want to see? How true is that picture? There's a whole, ways that you can work with it. But having an idea of sort of your default, and by the way, Mercury also rules your communication style, right? Oh my goodness. So communication style, just working with Mercury, like in a professional work setting, for example, just working with people's Mercuries, which equates to their communication styles, can change the dynamics of a whole team. Because if you know how to communicate with people, if you know how to tune into someone else's communication style and adapt your communication style to harmonize and match with them so that you actually are able to get your point across in a way that is comfortable and that makes people open to receive, you know, you're gonna be a winner in the traditional sense of working out there in the world. So how we do all these things naturally is, you know, we can see this in Mercury by sign, by house, by aspect. So I'm not going to go through all of it right now, but let's just do Mercury through the signs. So Mercury in Aries, how might a Mercury in Aries make sense of life, be kind of projecting the image of life, or be prone to think or communicate, right? Aries is very spontaneous and instinctual, direct, assertive, and it's going to be based on experience. So very oftentimes a Mercury in Aries is less overthinking it and more, you know, just let me do it and then figure it out from doing it. But this idea of how you project things from Mercury in Aries standpoint, it kind of, you know, one thing I always, that helps me with Aries is it's streaming consciousness, you know, it's what's happening now. So a Mercury in Aries is oftentimes less hindered by old attachments because there is a real push to do and to live and experience now. Okay, so just some ideas around that Mercury in Aries. Mercury in Taurus. So with Mercury in Aries, we are in a yang sign, so there's a going out of energy. And now with Mercury in Taurus, we naturally move back to the yin, we go back in. And that mind with Taurus is now more, you know, experience is definitely not the goal here. Now thinking becomes more stable. You know, what brings me security? My filter or my projection of reality is going to be focused a lot on, am I able to be self-sufficient? Do I have enough? Is this going to be stable for me? And there's a slowing down as well with Mercury in Taurus, because Taurus ultimately, you know, wants to make things rooted, wants to bring value, meaning, and purpose to what it does. So it's not just the, hey, I think I'll do it, you know, now I'm going to try it, and, you know, let me just see how that forms up. It really becomes much more of an attachment. And we know how Taurus can be famous for holding on to things and being stubborn. Same thing with the mind. You know, there can be some less flexibility here with, hey, this way of thinking has worked for me for a long time, and this is, you know, how it looks, and it's really grounded, and, you know, I'm comfortable with it, so don't try to push me out of that set. Mercury in Gemini, well, you know, that's in its own sign, so it's pretty comfortable, and this really can be a way of making sense of things, of just trying to get the information. You know, if I learn it in the book, it doesn't really matter so much if I've experienced it, but, you know, I have the information, I looked it up, I figured it out, I have the answer. Can be very programmed to coming up with different ideas, kicking things around, changing one's mind, you know, because information can change. So, oh, now I learned this new thing, so now my thoughts are different, now my reality is different. So there definitely is a malleability with this, but also sometimes, you know, a lack of actually finding a place to rest, you know. So a Mercury in Gemini can be a very busy, overactive mind that can short circuit itself with an overactive nervous system. But it's curious and it's fun and it's creative, you know. You know, it's out of anyone probably it gets that life is a story, so that can be fun. And then we move into Mercury into Cancer, and now all of a sudden that mind is really weighed down with the emotional experience. So what I think is married with my feelings, and so how I'm feeling and reacting to life, just how things feel in my how they sit in my stomach, right, is a very Cancer thing, is going to have a lot to do with what I think about them. Mercury in Cancer is not necessarily a logical thinker. It can just simply be, hey, I just feel this way about it, so it is this way. And then so the picture of life or the making sense of things doesn't make sense so much to other people. But there's a lot of creativity in here, a lot of sensitivity in here, and a lot of rich feminine energy, which is not always natural, to the Mercury process. So this idea of thinking through the feeling body, a lot of opportunity, but at the same time can be for, make for a little bit of madness. And of course, Cancer is ruled by the moon, and we know the moon always has a little bit of madness, for better or worse. So another thing about a Mercury in Cancer, it can be very soft, sensitive words, can have a way about words that brings so much feeling through. So that's another side of that piece that can be very beautiful. Mercury in Leo, the sun sign. So there's a sense of, wanting to be seen, needing to be seen, really expressing from the heart. And because Leo and the sun in general always has this feeling of a special sense of purpose. I have this special thing, a quest to achieve, this special mission in life. The Mercury function then, wants to communicate that to others. See what I'm doing, look what I'm doing. But the other thing is both Cancer and Leo have in common is they tend to make sense of things based on how they're reacting to things. So there's a certain level of defensive thinking, reactive thinking, quick, to think. One thing I didn't mention about Cancer is Cancer also is very much stuck about thinking in the past. Cancer has a lot to do with memory, so pulling up those memories. But both of the signs, Cancer and Leo, very much are sensitive to how the outside world is making them feel. And in Leo, how is the outside world giving me approval or affirmation of who I am? So Mercury and Leo, the thoughts can be focused a lot on myself. And I don't mean this in a selfish way. I mean this in a centered and self-Leo kind of way. The way I project my reality, if I'm a Leo, very much can be based on my own sense of reality within me. It's not very objective. We're not into the objective part of the wheel yet. So, we're still subjective. And then we move into Virgo, Mercury's other sign. And when Mercury gets into Virgo, it becomes, this huge piece of analysis, really trying to figure things out, trying to filter, trying to break things down, wanting to get things right. The Virgo has such a hyper focus. And when you put the Mercury thinking mind in there, it's a mind that can really get to the root of the problem. On the flip side, it can be a mind that is prone to neuroses, right? Because we think ourselves into so much stress, into, analysis to paralysis, or over worry or over control, right? Virgo is very controlling of the external environment. It believes if it controls the external environment, somehow, it will be okay. External environment meaning, the body, the workplace, the kind of the physical world around us. And so when you put Mercury into that sign, it can get stuck in mental loops of trying to control and figure things out, and have a hard time taking a break. It's ultimately the mind that doesn't have an off switch, at least at times. Mercury in Libra, we finally now break above the horizon, which means we're into objective awareness. And Mercury in Libra is an interesting one because, my gosh, as a thinker and a framer of reality, there's this whole idea of symmetry and beauty and balance that comes through this. There's certainly beauty. I didn't speak, but to Venus rules Libra, and Venus also rules Taurus. So Mercury and Taurus also can a mind that can bring much beauty and abundance. I didn't mention that, and I should, because Taurus is the ultimate sign of abundance. So there can be that level of fruition through the thinking or the making sense of things. But with Libra, it's a little different because it's now more externally focused, and so it's the beauty on the outside. So a Mercury in Libra could be wonderful at using words and communication to bring people together, to bridge differences, to bring harmony. At the same time, a Mercury in Libra, with Libra's tendency to project onto other people or to mimic other people, can frame its reality around other people's ideas or styles or personalities, which can make for a loss of, hey, what am I actually thinking for myself, and what do I just want on my own, or even having some confusion around, are these thoughts mine, or am I just thinking this because I think that's what someone else wants me to do, or how someone else wants it to be done. So these are some of the different parts of Mercury and Libra. And of course, I don't have time, or I'm not taking the time to go super deep into them, but just a little, window so we can sort of get the spark lit up again and think about, hey, wherever our Mercury is, where is it happening for us? Mine's in Cancer. So that emotional thinking, that emotional attachment to thinking, that seeing the world through how I'm feeling about it, it can be super awesome and creative for me as an artist, but at other times, it's not what's really happening. And I need to, helps me to give space to actually try to see more what's happening from the outside perspective, and know that it's not always about me. The things below the horizon, oftentimes the thinking can be from so much stuck in me that I don't really see what's happening around me. But back to above the wheel. So we were in Libra. Now let's move on to Mercury in Scorpio. Ooh, probably the deepest thinker ever. So this would be the classic therapist, the classic person who's getting into the occult, into the hidden subjects and tearing beneath the surface, and getting into like the why, right? Scorpio always wants to have know why. Why does it work that way? Why does it happen that way? So Mercury in Scorpio is this penetrating mind that can get beneath the surface. Researchers, for example, or another example of people who oftentimes have this type of a mind or a similar signature. It's like a rotor-rooter. It gets in there and gets things out. Mercury in Scorpio, it's a fixed sign. So the other piece is that it can also be stuck, and particularly it can be stuck in its own overcomplication of things and overwhelm. Because the flip side of always going deep and always pushing past the surface is that things become so complicated. They become so much drama in life that there is no resting place, and that can be tiring. It could overtax the mind, and also it can rob us from a certain level of simplicity that the polarity point Taurus is able to do so well. To flip to that side quickly in the polarity, Mercury in Taurus, part of the beauty it can create with the mind is a simplicity, a more restful mind, a mind that isn't overburdened, a mind that is more grounded in reality, whatever you want, however you want to define reality. All right, so let's move on to Sagittarius. Oh, the Sagittarian mind. Mercury and Sagittarius, big thinkers, oftentimes super strong intuition, truth seekers, but with Sagittarius, like within communication, oftentimes it's fun. These people are great at using words. They can, sell you things easily, whether they're a salesman or not. And Mercury and Sagittarius ultimately is about trying to expand consciousness of the mind. So people with this signature naturally oftentimes are pursuing different avenues of philosophy, spirituality, different ways of looking at things. on one hand. You know, the other side can be the more rigid religious, or it doesn't have to be religious, but like the tighter, you know, belief system side of Sagittarius, which is I already know what I know. I don't need to try anything else. This is just how it is. So we also get that with the Mercury in Sagittarius, the you know, a bit of a know-it-all. Its polarity point Gemini has its own flavor of know-it-all too, but Sag is probably the ultimate know-it-all, and then Mercury in Sagittarius really carries that flavor. But you know, people with strong Sagittarius generally do know a lot of things. It's just, you know, finding the healthy way to let those express and not be attached, and still be willing and able to see, you know, other viewpoints. But Mercury in Sagittarius can be brilliant at strategy, brilliant at seeing the bigger concept, brilliant at seeing what's really going on with the entire system. You know, it's the difference between deductive and inductive reasoning, right? Deductive reasoning breaks everything down by its parts. Inductive reasoning can make sense of things based on everything happening at once, and that's one of the gifts of Sagittarius. So bringing it into Mercury into Capricorn, which also has a big view, truly has a 360-degree view. Mercury in Capricorn becomes a little more rigid, though, because it, in many ways, is focused on accomplishing things, reaching success, tangibly. It's an earth sign, tangibly doing something with itself and with life. So, you know, Saturn's tendency as ruler of Capricorn is to go for long-term results, to build stability, to have a level of security, to earn respect, to reach a level of mastery. So Mercury in Capricorn is going to carry some of that flavor. It is maybe going to speak like an authority and want to be respected as an authority when they speak. Sometimes the voice of a Mercury in Capricorn can be heard, you know, throughout an entire room, and people look and pay attention because that person sounds like they know what they're talking about, have a natural level of leadership in there, or a level of maturity. On the flip side, maybe they sound like a parent, and you know, not everyone appreciates being, you know, spoken to like a parent when they've already had their own parents and perhaps are working through their own issues. But these are some of the different pieces of it. But another piece about Mercury and Capricorn is there can be a real attachment to the past, similar to its polarity Cancer, just through some different ways. You know, Cancer tends to be more emotionally tied to the past. Capricorn is tied to the past in the sense of, this is how we've always done it, this is the way we do it, this is the way that it works, and a respect and honoring of time, what has been earned through time, and also a respect for the hierarchy of, you know, positions of you know, of people, for example. So a Mercury in Capricorn can have this, can get stuck in the paradigm of what was sometimes. It's not always the fastest signature to be ready to move on to the next new thing, especially when it knows how much work went into getting where it's at. So when you're thinking about this and how easy it may be to come up with a new happy relationship with your mind, you know, give yourself some space around, think, oh, okay, like if I have a Capricorn mind, you know, what's it going to be like for me to create space? Very different than if I have a Gemini mind. You know, you will need to come up with different tools, different resources to let that space naturally evolve, you know. And so the breath of fresh air, you know, when we move from Mercury to Aquarius, as it always is a mind that wants to reinvent, you know, a mind that wants to break free from old structures, a mind that wants liberation, a mind that wants to progress and use resources and community and technology to further society. You know, there's this idea of idealism of creating a better future, which ultimately comes from creating a better now. You know, if we sit around waiting to create the future, it's not going to ever happen. Like, we have to start now. And Aquarius is willing to use that energy, so it can be a very innovative, inventive mind. At the same time, as much as it can be quote unquote outside the box, it's a fixed sign. So, you know, when it's decided that it has found a place of liberation, it can then get stuck in that space. And then what was once liberation actually then becomes confinement. So that's something to be aware of with Aquarius. Aquarius is not as free thinking and liberal as we all like to believe. In modern astrology, it's ruled by Uranus, which is completely free of these things. But the sign is not the same as the planet. Planets are free agents, but the sign is coming from Capricorn, moving to Pisces. It has influences beyond just Aquarius. It's still trying to fit in and work within the community, to work within the, you know, society at large. And it's ultimately moving to a place of dissolving, culmination and dissolving. So there can be an attachment with Aquarius to be aware of, you know, which can sort of be this idea of, you know, I already know this is the best way and the smartest way, and I don't want to hear about your way. You know, that can happen here. But ultimately, you know, this is like, you know, Aquarius is linked with the star card in the Tarot, which is the water bringer, which brings fresh water to life. You know, to bring things back that were dead, that became too rigid, too tight, too dry. You know, it brings in the next new evolution of things. You know, brings about metamorphosis. So finally, we come to Mercury in Pisces. And Pisces, no matter where you find it in life, including in astrology, is always in a phase of dying. And I don't mean that in a sad dying, like never coming back, because I don't believe that way. You know, energy just transforms. But whatever the form has been, Pisces is in an unraveling, melting, going back to where it came from to then be reborn again. So there always is this sort of sense of kind of needing to wrap things up. So Mercury in Pisces oftentimes can be partially in that space of how do I want to really contribute, or how do I want to spend the last part of this time before I move on to something else. And whether it's conscious or not, I'm just saying this is just infused in the energy. So, and because Pisces itself is about to move into a liminal space, you know, it is kind of spacey. So a Mercury in Pisces is not always thinking in what we consider to be reality. You know, it's open to altered states of consciousness, and it is already feeling a big pull of the soul away from the body or the form back into the, you know, into the spirit state, or to the state of energy. So Mercury and Pisces, you know, for people who are doing spiritual work, or you know, these types of things, they oftentimes have access to the higher realms. They are, maybe they're able to communicate more easily with their spirit guides or angels or animals, you know, whatever your belief is around that. Maybe they just simply are you could have psychically be more in tune with the energy, right? So a Mercury in Pisces is going to be very good at communicating without using words. You know, that they're going to be good with energy, with feeling the energy. But you know, this idea of how you make sense of things, you know, that's a whole other story, because Pisces also can feel confusing, can feel overwhelming, in the sense of, you know, something is, as with all Pisces and Neptune types of feelings, can feel like something greater than myself is taking me over. You know, and that's because the transition's already on you, you know, when you're in Pisces. So, you know, to the extent that you hold on too tightly in Pisces, things get distorted. You know, when you can surrender and let go, things can move with the flow. But there can be a fear of, you know, even losing your mind, you know, with Mercury being, with the mind we're talking about here, Mercury and Pisces, there can be a feeling of that, of lost in thought, or confused about my thoughts, or, you know, what do I really think, or or my thinking becomes so filled with emotional sensitivity that I have a hard time kind of harnessing things in the real reality that I still live in now. Because a lifetime is still happening now if I have a Mercury in Pisces. Like, even if the transition's on me, I'm still in my human body now, needing to do my thing. So on the super positive side of Mercury and Pisces, this is like, can be so dreamy, so creative, such inspired thinking. I'm really connected with something greater, and naturally tuned in with nature, you know, maybe even being able to communicate with animals or energies outside of just the human realm, because a certain level of, you know, magical things happens in Pisces land when the veil gets thin, you know, when the human attachments get thin. But there runs these two sides of it, or as many sides as you want of it, right? Pisces is the kaleidoscope. So think about a kaleidoscope mind, and how you might use it, and how you might have been using it in the past, and how you might want to use it going forward. So I think that wraps up You Are Mercury. I thank you for spending time with me with this series, and I hope you'll continue to tune in, and please do reach out if you have feedback, ideas. Oh, lastly, one thing I wanted to mention, some of you may be familiar with this, but there are some people that work with planetary walks or astrological yoga. There is Peaceworks International has a Foundation Dances and Walks manual, and they have a section on each planet. And I thought it would be cool to look at the Mercury piece. And here's what they say about Mercury. And I'll leave you with this, and then maybe you can incorporate this into your own Mercury meditation, living meditation, or however it works for you. Mercury has been pictured with wings. The Mercury breath is in and out quickly through either or both nostrils, and it tends to speed up all processes. It's very good for short spurts, like for sprinters. It brings vitality to the surface, but if uncontrolled, it can waste your vitality. While Mercury operates rapidly, it also appears as if on the surface. People using Mercury either have excellent first impressions or none at all. There are no deep thinkers with Mercury, although we'd all argue depending on the sign it's in, right? But when you're just straight using your Mercury functions, it talks about wanting to get things done. And it says Mercury differs from Jupiter in that Jupiter tends to long strides. Mercury likes short ones. But Jupiter, wishing to include everything and everybody, can often fail of the goal, while Mercury tends to be successful. Mercury doesn't have too many goals, and so he doesn't have too many distractions. The Mercury spin, and in this case, this is the movement of your body, and you can Google this if you want to find more. The Mercury spin can be done in either direction, counterclockwise or clockwise. And it is excellent for rapid ecstatic achievement. But this ecstasy is not always over intoxicating, which means a mental control may remain. How fitting is that for Mercury, right? Even in your ecstatic spin, your mind still holds on. It's needed by many types of dancers and artists who wish to work rapidly, for creative writers, etc. A key to a successful Mercury walk is to never move your feet faster than your breath, keeping both in rhythm. And with that, I wish you many blessings, and thank you again for your time and for joining me on this journey. Take care.